Hello everyone, I'm Parker and we continue to think outside the box. In this lecture I would like to discuss the performance and role of schools and teachers during the high school years. During these years, schools have a lot of responsibility, especially in the latter stages of high school, such as in the 11th and 12th grades when students are preparing for college entrance exams. Teachers tend to increase the workload and assignments and may even offer additional classes and tutoring to support students. As a result, high school students typically have very little free time, although some students may choose not to study much and have plenty of free time. However, these students are in the minority. The majority of high school students are focused on their studies and work hard to achieve their goal of getting into college. During this period, schools and teachers tend to follow a consistent approach. They provide more study materials and assignments, leaving students with little time for other activities. This includes practice exams, extra exercises and other repetitive tasks designed to keep students focused on their studies. While I'm not entirely familiar with current teaching methods, the goal of these educational plans is to help students achieve good grades and a bright future by getting into college. Overall, the intention behind these efforts by schools and teachers is admirable. As responsible educators, teachers hold a vital role in shaping the academic growth of their students. However, the effectiveness of their approach is up for debate. Although it's crucial to encourage students to study diligently, complete assignments and gain knowledge, relying entirely on practice tests or simulated exams isn't the best strategy in my opinion. I'm not advocating for the immediate dismissal of traditional teaching methods because they've been in use for a long time. However, if we continue to adopt this method year after year, I question whether it guarantees that all students will attain excellent results. It's not realistic at all. Many students face a major problem when they reach high school, and that's the issue of their confused thinking patterns. Why do they struggle with subjects like mathematics, physics and chemistry from junior high school onward? It's primarily because they lack a proper thinking pattern. However, I don't understand why teachers haven't emphasized or addressed this point. Of course, I'm not singling out specific schools or teachers. This issue is the same worldwide. The mindset and approach of teachers around the world are often similar. I'm not here to criticize your methods or call them foolish, but their effectiveness is indeed limited. It's worth considering whether this is realistic or not. We are all adults and there's no need to hurt each other with harsh words at present. I believe this is the most significant issue in many schools and even among some high school students. Some exceptions should prompt schools and teachers to think deeply. What exceptions am I talking about? It's the students who don't seem to study seriously but still perform exceptionally well in exams. These students have a good thinking pattern and their grasp of knowledge is systematic rather than fragmented. They have a precise understanding of key points and experiences. So sometimes you see these students not attending classes regularly, not studying diligently or engaging in various extracurricular activities, but they excel in exams. Such students are particularly common in universities. After entering university, you can see many students involved in a lot of extracurricular activities and socializing, yet they perform exceptionally well in exams. I don't understand why, when faced with such students, schools and teachers only attribute their success to intelligence or superior abstract and logical thinking abilities. Why don't they consider the issue of their thinking patterns? This is the key. When I was summarizing the big tree thinking model theory, I thought about this because I also went through the student phase, had classmates like this and went through that period. I wondered why some students found learning so effortless and performed well in exams. Why didn't I feel smarter than them regularly? Everyone believes they are smart, so why can't I keep up with them? To put it simply, it all comes down to the issue of thinking patterns. When you elevate this thinking pattern issue to your agenda, you'll change your entire life, not just in terms of learning but also in life problem solving, making friends and all other aspects. It all transforms. So I emphasize that during the high school period before they have to take the college entrance exams, if students still don't have a good thinking pattern, to put it bluntly, they really won't be able to continue their education and they won't be able to achieve good grades. This, in my opinion, is the most crucial factor. I'm not trying to shift this responsibility onto schools and teachers. That's not my intention. My intention is quite clear. I want to remind schools and teachers that they should be able to identify these factors, including the key points of thinking patterns. Of course, it doesn't have to be my big tree thinking pattern, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the best. I don't have that idea. You can come up with your thinking pattern. The most important thing is that you need to teach students in a way that they can accept, understand, and turn this thinking pattern into their thinking habits instead of sticking with the habitual thinking patterns they have developed since childhood or adolescence. These habitual thinking patterns are influenced by their families and life environments, and there is a significant difference. Many of these habitual thinking patterns can be wrong. So if you, as schools and teachers, can recognize the seriousness of this issue, then I have to ask, why can't you summarize and refine it, and then use it to educate and help your students? So the focus of this lesson is for schools and teachers. I believe you must change this teaching approach. You need to incorporate this thinking pattern for learning into your teaching. That's the most critical issue. Of course, at this point I also have a sense of sadness. Very few people can accept this thinking pattern, or my big tree thinking pattern theory. This is a kind of ongoing sorrow that extends not only to students' high school years but also into their university years and even into their working years until they settle down in their personal and professional lives. Therefore, the purpose of this lecture is to make everyone aware of the errors in their thinking patterns so that they can change their approach to learning, life, and eventually their careers. Going back to our discussion during high school, it's undeniable that schools and teachers put in a lot of effort, whether it's in so-called good schools or bad schools. What many schools and teachers haven't realized during this period is the need to change students' thinking patterns. If we can become aware of this aspect, then I believe that students in high school, if they truly have a good thinking pattern, will find their studies much easier and they won't be overwhelmed by the pressure of learning. I don't know how schools and teachers feel about this, but what I'm saying is based on the reality of the situation. During high school, there is another phenomenon in some so-called prestigious schools or private schools, which involves having students live on campus and adopting a closed management and education system. As for how students feel about this, we won't discuss that for now. From the perspective of the schools themselves, this approach seems to be modeled after military training and management, where recruits go through closed training and education. While this approach can be successful in the military context, I believe it is not successful when applied to schools. In my opinion, it's a mistake. Why am I saying this? Let's analyze it from two perspectives. First, as a school, when you adopt this military-style so-called closed management approach, what are you doing? You are restricting students' freedom and limiting their leisure time, all in an attempt to help them concentrate on their studies. But can you achieve that? It's difficult. Why do I say this? Because you are not a military organization. Your intentions may be good, but the situation and context are different. The recruits that the military enlists are indeed energetic young individuals, but their strict training leaves them with little energy to think about anything else. When they have some rest time, they fall asleep as soon as the whistle blows because they are exhausted. They undergo extensive training in various disciplines daily, which takes a toll on their physical stamina. So naturally, these recruits don't have the time or energy to think about other matters. They are too tired. But schools are different. Students, after all, don't expend a lot of physical energy. They engage in mental labor. So for a significant portion of students, when they feel exhausted from studying, what they need isn't sleep. They need relaxation, like playing games or using their phones. They need this kind of downtime, and they can't simply lie in their dormitories and fall asleep immediately. It's not achievable. Therefore, in terms of this approach, my personal opinion is that it's not correct to Employ this type of management and education for high school students, especially for the majority, regardless of the theories or methods your school uses to constrain and demand from students. It's not the right way. Moreover, as a school, have you ever considered a broader question? Can you truly take on this responsibility if one day you compile statistics on the outcome of this closed management? How many students eventually go on to college, and how do you account for those who don't? Will you simply push it aside, attributing it all to the students' issues and lack of effort? Why don't you address your management problems? This issue has problems on both sides. Some schools, to be blunt, implement boarding and closed management not for the sake of education quality but purely for profit. This is a very concerning situation, and to put it bluntly, when the education system becomes tainted by financial interests, it loses its meaning. The outcomes of such education become meaningless because it has changed. Students are no longer learning knowledge, they are serving the desires and greed of certain individuals, regardless of how you all might perceive this. My understanding of this approach is as I've described. As I mentioned earlier, the learning process for students is fundamentally different from military training. The physical and mental demands are not comparable. So for a school that employs closed management, restricting students from going home except on weekends, I truly wonder if you've considered the gravity of this responsibility. Another crucial issue during high school is that students are just entering adulthood while most are at this stage. Some might still be relatively young. Is it good or bad for these newly minted adults to live in a communal setting? My personal opinion is that it's bad and wrong. Why do I think that? These students are just entering adulthood, and during this period they are relatively independent at home. Most students going to high school come from families that are well off enough, although there might be exceptions. These students have just overcome their rebellious phase, so when you gather them together in a communal setting, it's inevitable that they will experience a sense of novelty and excitement. During this time they can easily form small groups, engage in idle talk, eat, drink, and mimic adult behaviors. They start making friends and behaving as if they are already adults. Have you ever thought that their mentality during this period is not mature? During this time it's easy for them to disconnect their lives, social interactions and studies because they waste time. So I don't recommend putting children who have just become adults or are not yet adults into communal living situations. This is very scary because it can divert a lot of their energy. So think about it. It will have a very significant negative impact on their studies and their performance in exams. On the other hand, there is another viewpoint which is also my personal opinion. I believe that young people need to experience some communal living because it can be a form of character building. They shouldn't be so self-centered and should develop a sense of unity and teamwork which is beneficial for their future lives and careers. This is what we call team spirit. However, I think this period of communal living is not suitable during high school. It's more appropriate after entering university, where there is a transitional period that makes it the right time. You can research and investigate this further, or you can ask classmates who have gone to university to share their experiences and thoughts on this matter. Living in a communal setting during university has distinct characteristics. The first notable characteristic is that students come from all over the country, bringing with them different customs, habits, and languages. During this period, communal living becomes important for young people because it's not limited to one region, unlike high school, where students may come from the same city or county and even know each other's families. In university it's different. Students may not know each other at all. This is the first difference. The second difference is the significant transition from high school to university, which is much larger than the transition from middle school to high school. To be frank, students who get into university are generally much more mature than they were during their high school years. When they encounter this new phase of life, they typically have stronger self-control abilities. So for most of them, the experience of Communal living during this period is beneficial and advantageous. One of the most crucial points to note is that college courses during the first year are typically easier, as most university students would agree. This allows first-year students to better adjust to communal living, which is not the case in high school. In high school, students have to focus on preparing for their college entrance exams and cannot afford to disperse their time. However, in college there is ample time to engage in seemingly wasteful activities such as courses that may be repetitions of high school material. As a result, first-year students have the energy to handle these situations. After half a year or a semester, they adapt to communal living and their studies catch up as well. I'm not sure if everyone understands, but based on these considerations, I still believe that communal living during high school is not suitable, especially for young people. This is because during high school students face immense academic pressure. If communal living distracts them and disperses their focus, they might not study at all. They'll spend their days thinking about hanging out with their friends, eating, drinking, playing, and gaming. I don't know if you agree with these viewpoints, but I believe they represent a very important and fundamental distinction. To conclude, we acknowledge the concerns and expectations that teachers and schools have for high school students. However, it is important to assess if the teaching materials, methods and approaches being utilized are appropriate for this stage. This is a critical aspect to consider. Worldwide high school education suffers from a fundamental lack of education on thinking patterns, which leads to an unfortunate situation. Alright, that concludes this lecture.
Friends who are interested in my lectures, please click to subscribe and click on the little bell. At the same time, the links to the Big Tree Thinking Model Theory ebook and the Big Tree Thinking Model and Junior High School Mathematics lectures are here below. Friends can click on the link to watch related free lectures. Thank you all.